Alright, so this latest chapter of My Hero Academia was really something else. It may not have revelations on par with some of the recent ones to come before, but the depth to which it stands to provide in relation to one of our most elusive characters was really special. With the previous chapter, we saw the clone of Redestro deal some major blows to the Public Safety Commission, which was followed up by the unbelievable liberation of several prisons across the country, helmed by the recently freed All for One, as his consciousness that currently resides within Shigaraki would have the man rest in pursuit of perfection. 2 days after all this madness, we'd have the current situation of our heroes in training presented with them in Central Hospital. With this, Bakugo arose following the puncturing of his stomach. Shoto decided to take on Dabi himself as his mother seemingly came to visit along with his siblings, and finally, Deku has yet to wake up and has shown no indication of doing so. With this latest chapter, we open up with the sentiment of an adolescent Hawks, who'd express that to him at the time, heroes existed within the confines of television screens. They came across as fictional characters more than anything else. Now, Hawks and his family lived a good distance away from the city in what was a rather dingy looking enclosure. Within was an even more unsavory household, as his father would berate him with insults as he questioned the boy's reasoning for going into the city. His father's paranoia was apparent as he would immediately question if his son had given him up to the authorities. Meanwhile, the mother of Hawks sat around, giving little care to the situation. From here, Hawks would respond by saying that his wings were reacting to something, and so he checked to see if something was going on. But nothing was, and so he left, and did so without catching anyone's attention. His father did not believe him in the slightest and continued to yell, forbidding him from leaving their home again. And although Hawks' mother wasn't concerned with their conversation, she was concerned by the fact that the TV wasn't working, which would cause Hawks' father to begin to yell at her, then demanding that she find him his next target. You see, the father of Hawks was a hitman, a villain, and his mother was an accomplice that helped him avoid being captured, and the two would go on to sire Hawks unintentionally. Hawks' father was a wicked man that was physically abusive, kicking his son out of the way and irrationally yelling at him for having his back turned. Aloud, he would then express his regret in depending on Hawks' mother and her quirk, as to him, Hawks was nothing but an inconvenience. Meanwhile, Hawks' mother would just ask the man not to leave. And here, we'd get a clear look at some eyeballs floating around her. And considering what Hawks' father has said, it's safe to assume that she possesses some sort of observation quirk, which would account for the sensory aspect of Hawks' feathers. Now, Hawks was a rather docile child that simply endured everything thrown his way. But one day, his mother would casually inform him that his father was captured while trying to steal a car. That of all people, Endeavor was the one to stop him. And in that moment, the world of fiction came to life for Hawks, as Endeavor had saved him. But whereas Hawks was getting excited, his mother was getting panicked and decided that the two should flee as to avoid being caught. However, his mother wasn't able to keep the two financially stable, and so they became homeless, living on the streets. And with the now disheveled state of their lives, a young Hawks would advise his mother to go to the police. However, she would tell her child to get them some money, not caring how he'd go about it. Now, there's a certain passivity or indifference tied to this that just makes me sick to my stomach. This adult not only shifts the responsibility of their predicament onto her young child, but she also encourages him to live an unsavory life akin to his father. She'd further question his existence just as his father had before, questioning what his wings were good for, as Hawks would just clutch onto his Endeavor doll, hoping to be saved yet again. Eventually, some men from the Public Safety Commission would approach the two, speaking to Hawks as if he were the guardian, saying that his family will be taken care of. That in exchange for such comforts, he'll need to abandon his current life and live under their guidance. From here, We'd flash to the current day where a thoroughly injured Hawks would awaken to the call of Best Jeanist, who couldn't exactly tell if the man had passed out or passed on. And mind you, Best Jeanist was whipping it in a beautiful vehicle. Hawks would then respond to Best Jeanist, but do so with text-to-speech through his phone. And as it turns out, Central Hospital was responsible for preserving his life. Again, this is where the students are right now. Jeanist would then further elaborate that it was thanks to their surgical expertise that he was able to be put in a state of suspended animation, which was inspired by the Nomu. And because of this, Hawks would then apologize for the circumstance, but ultimately he couldn't afford a lack of commitment to the act as they were able to deceive Dabi by doing so. Now, interestingly enough, Hawks brought up the possibility of the villains attempting to use Jeanist's body in the creation of a Nomu, which is just insane. And what's crazier is that we theorized such a possibility early last year. But suddenly, Jeanist would swerve as he'd spotted some trouble. Several villains were attacking and making a scene, and in an instant, Jeanist would extend his fibers from his car and capture all the assailants. Now, Jeanist would then ask the former captive where the police or local heroes were, as the man would sadly say that they wouldn't come. You see, the police had their hands full dealing with all the jailbreaks across the country, and with the recent criticism, many heroes closed down their agencies and went into retirement. That is really bad. Now, this next scene just goes to show how bad things really are. It seems like the illegal support items manufactured by the villains have become far more accessible to the masses and are now being possessed by the disillusioned. And at that, the brewing animosity towards so-called heroes and the current situation at large is coming to a boil, and it is pretty terrifying. But these two heroes would then leave and arrive in front of a particular house. Here, there was apparently something Hawks needed to check up on before approaching the public again. They then enter the house as Hawks would call out for his mother. He would then discover a letter. As it turns out, some scary men came to the house and threatened her while demanding that she tell them everything about their family, to which she would comply. She then apologized to Hawks for this, and as to no longer be a burden to him, would leave. Hawks would then wonder how Dabi managed to get this far, as Hawks' mother was indeed the one to leak his information, so the notion of Hawks and Dabi being childhood friends or related to each other in childhood is out the window. But now, in knowing that, Jeanist would hit Hawks with the Prince Zuko line, "That's rough, buddy." Hawks then expressed that when he gave up his name, the relationship between him and his mother was severed. He always believed he was alright with that. But in the end, what he once thought of as being saved was just him turning his back on everything. And without going into too much detail about my own personal experiences, this hit close to home. And so these words, they really resonated with me. A guy who helps people. In the end, that sentiment has finally returned to Hawks, and it is refreshing. And sure, maybe it's a little bit cold and insensitive, but with the current state of the Public Safety Commission, there is no one left to give him orders. And with that, there are no chains left to keep him down. We would then cut back to Hawks' childhood as his mother held his hand and brought him to a store. At the time, he was being a bit difficult, as kids can be, and desperately wanted to go outside, so she'd tell him to keep this a secret from his father. She would then buy him a toy, but considering All Might was too expensive, he would get Endeavor from the bargain bin, as his mother would tell him to be strong like Endeavor. Getting back to the present, Hawks would remove the covering from his mouth and shakily speak, saying that when people are backed into corners, they may find a liberation that exposes their true nature. And it's for that reason that even now, he admires twice, as when faced with death, he was still desperate to help those he cared about. And Hawks wants to be more like that, a sentiment that was expressed with his very first act of heroism, the act that got the attention of the Commission in the first place. You see, Hawks, even without knowing heroes to be a real thing, despite being raised in an emotionally and physically abusive household with no human interaction outside of his parents, possessed a chivalrously heroic spirit, but one that was compromised by the Commission's exploitation. Hawks would then say that even if everything Dabi said about the Todoroki household is true, he is certain that it is not the same now. And as a product of abuse himself, his perspective is just so fascinating to me. Genist would then ask what Hawks intends to do from here, as Hawks would respond by saying that he has to settle things, even if it kills him. And that the first step is his beginning, as Endeavor is in trouble. And that was the chapter. Now, leading up to the war and during it, it was very clear to me that Hawks as a character was created to fulfill a very specific purpose in this story. But now that we're past that point and the man is still alive, I am pretty curious what role he'll play to validate Horikoshi keeping him alive. Right now, he might as well be quirkless as his wings have yet to grow back, and worst case, have been cauterized by Dabi's flames to where they'll never grow back. But with the notion of things leading back to his beginnings in relation to Endeavor, I can't help but think of a situation relating to his father considering the recent prison breaks. Dabi for now has eased up on his assault and doesn't have anything to do with Hawks' origins. But you know what, I don't imagine that would be a riveting story to tell right now, and so I feel like this is more metaphoric and relating to the simple desire to help people that was expressed before. And right now, he wants to help save the man who saved him oh so long ago. But what do you guys think? I for one really enjoyed this chapter, and I hope you did too. Little Hawks is easily the most adorable thing I have seen from this story thus far, and he needs to be protected at all costs. Subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, as we have plenty more My Hero Academia content coming your way as well. And if you want to see us cover other series unavailable on the channel, go ahead and check us out over on Patreon, where we do just that. Because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I am Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.